Welcome to our first Image Comp debrief. We are going to go over some of the images that were in the image competition last week. And we have Cayce Newman here. He is going to be going over some of the judges' comments, adding additional comments, explaining things, and maybe giving some clarity to us on how you can make your images better. So welcome, Cayce.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
There's going to be 10 images that we're going to look at today. In future debriefings, if you have an image that you had entered and you would like discussed, just send an email to imagecomp@ieppv.com and we'll add your image to the list so that we're sure to include it so we can discuss it for you. And you can either remain anonymous or you can be in the conversation and ask specific questions about your specific image if you'd like. So I'm going to share my screen here in just a minute. And our first image that we're going to look at was in the Master Illustrative category. It was called Bottles of Dreams and it received a 78. Aaron was the judge that made comments and he gave it a 77 for the score, and he said he appreciated the creativity. It had nice impact as it first appeared. The elements around the edge he found distracting, and there were bright spots around the top and right side. He thought if you clean those up to help keep his eye inside the frame, it would, and keep it to the middle of the image, it would help bring your score up. So Cayce, if you could expand on that and give us some more comments on this image.
Yes, I think that for the most part, I agree with the original judge. The thing about judging and the thing about entering in competition is little things, little tiny things that you wouldn't think, and you may not even notice, can make or break an image. This image, you said it got a 78 on judging?
Yes.
Yeah. Especially considering the subject matter is a little bit abstract-y in nature, the way it's lit and the way it's recorded. It's the impact is subtle, if anything, and so it's not going to be an image that's going to jump out. It's going to be an image that you need to sit with for a little bit. And so then you start to see some little things like the thing that they mentioned along the top edge of the image. You can see right at the edge of the image, you can see those little white spots and those little things that are creeping into the image. And any distracting element where that's going to draw the judge's eye away from the story that you want told is going to be a negative. So anything that's going to be at the edge of the frame, like at the very top image, you can see those little white, whatever those are, other bottles, maybe the bottom of other bottles or whatever. Along the right-hand side of the frame, there's another one that's more prominent into the frame. All of those things, that's going to catch a judge's eye, and they're going to say, oh, see, I don't like that. That's a problem, because it's pulling their attention and focus away from the story that you want them to be focusing on. So in an image like this, if you Photoshop that stuff out, any distracting element, just you'd be treating that like a dust spot. It's got to go. It's got to be gone. And then helping the judge stay focused to the area of the image that you want. For instance, if you were going to do a little vignetting along the bottom row of bottles and along the top row of bottles, that's subtle. I'm talking not heavy-handed, brutal vignetting, but subtle, soft vignetting that help the judge's eye stay in there. That's going to help. And then finally, a presentation. I know that a lot of photographers like to just submit an image, and that seems to be a thing, or maybe they don't know how to make a presentation. But I will tell you that to a judge's eye, a presentation can make a proper presentation can make a pretty significant difference in how the image is viewed, because it frames it frames what you want them to see in ways that seeing a full frame image doesn't, and it signifies to the judges, it does to me anyway, and based on the thousands of other images I've judged with other judges and heard the comments they say, I'm confident in saying that to them it does as well. It signifies that the maker, how to say this in a way that reflects accurately what I'm trying to say. The maker is committed to the image. You want to pull out from the image everything that you want the judge to see, and you're not just throwing something out there saying, this is my thing. You're serious about the image. That's kind of what a presentation does. So when I'm saying presentation, what I mean is like key lines and the edge strokes that you'll see on a lot of images. There are some that you're going to see in this competition tonight, or not the competition, but the workshop tonight, that have presentations, and a couple of them have very good presentations. So when those come up, I'll point them out. But it's just another way to let a judge, for you to frame the thing you think is important and let the judge know that you're serious about your image. You spent some time with it, and you didn't just grab a thing, take it out of camera, do a few things here and there, and then submit it. And again, sometimes this is looked at as a bad word, and I look at it as a bad word, but there's often not another way to say this. It's a way to separate out the snapshot entries from the serious entries, if that makes sense. So those three things, every little thing that you can do to improve your image gets you closer, especially if you have an image like this that's subtle and you're fighting for a merit rather than a superior image, a 95 or 100 or even a 85. If you're borderline merit, you got to do every little thing that you can do to get your image to be no flaw. Judge will like it. There's not a thing that's going to detract from your story, so they can't say a negative thing, they can't see a negative thing. Well, that's a merit. So that's, when I'm looking at images, those are kind of like my thought processes.
So in this one, would it have been like easy just to crop the top of this down just a skosh, just to take those little white spots off the top, and then maybe clone out on the right hand side, that about the midway down, there's that white spot?
That's a good question, and there are two, well, there's maybe more than two, but to my eye, I can see two immediate ways to do that. One is just to use Photoshop to clone out those areas and leave the overall composition the same. The other would be to crop off the top a little bit, because the way you're cropped into those the openings in the bottles right there at the top of the frame, that might be a thing that the image would look overall better without that. So, you would need, as the maker, you need to go in and look at a couple of prop changes to see if that's a way to improve it. I think that probably would be, cropping in just so you're not seeing the half part of the open bottle there. I think that'd probably be an improvement. It leaves the darker part of the bottle lip right on your edge frame rather than all those little light areas. So yes, in this instance, I think that would be an improvement.
Okay. Thank you. All right, our next image is North Head Sunset. It received a 77 overall. Eleanor was the judge that made comments on it, and she judged it and gave it a 78. She said she enjoyed the image. She liked the painterly effect. She thought it was calming, and she liked the way that the grass flows. She commended the maker. Her problem that she didn't like was the corner, the upper right corner. The sky was very bright. She wasn't sure that if there's any pixels left in there, and her eye kept getting pulled up to that bright area. So she thought if you could bring that bright upper right corner down, it would bring her score up.
Yeah, as you're talking, I'm hand cropping my screen just to see if how that might play. So I was mentioning to Kim earlier that I actually watched this image competition live when it was happening, and I remember a lot of these images coming up as I was an observer, a viewer, an online viewer, and I remember this image, and I also enjoy the painterly effect. My take on the image might be a little bit different than her critique. I think that when you have an image like this, and the story you're trying to tell is more a landscape with a lighthousey thing, and the super brightest part of the image is all the top, third of the image where the sky goes to white, that is going to be a big distraction, not just a little bit, but a huge distraction. So, and overall, the image feels a little flat contrast-wise. The contrast just feels a little flat, and the image is overall a little light. I would, if I were photoshopping this, if I were doing the edits on this image, I would try to, while keeping the painterly effect, because I do like that, I would try to see what an edit with some deeper contrast, a little, and it doesn't have to be a lot, subtle is good, a little bit punchier in that area, and then try to bring something into that sky so it's not so overwhelmingly bright, because that's, when you look at this image, the eye does a thing when you first look at an image. It looks at like the brightest areas, the areas of greatest contrast, or the areas of brightest color, like a red. So if there's a red somewhere in an image, your eye is going to go to that, like maybe first, and we'll keep going back to it if it's not, let's see, it's out of character with the rest of the image, let's say. Incongruous, that's the word I was looking for. It's a little bit of incongruency. I will keep going back to that, and going back to that bright sky. My eye keeps, I can't get away from viewing that bright sky. So I would definitely play with that sky a lot and try to put some depth and tone into those super bright areas and bring that in. I wonder what the original exposure of this looked like, and how much that could be brought down, and the sky deepened in some density and pixelation in those areas, and then the painterly effect added to it with a little contrasty feel to it, so that it's not quite so flat feeling. And then also, again, presentation might help. So that for me, it wasn't necessarily about a single bright area, but more most of the sky is kind of that way for me. Does that make sense?
Yes. So on this one, the presentation is different. The key line is not right along the edge of the image. The key line is offset from the image. As a judge, do you like that or do you not like that? Does that make the presentation better or not as good? Is it distracting? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that a key line, or whatever, however you want to characterize the thing that's going on at the edge of the image there, it might as well not even be there if that's going to be the representation of the presentation. It's more of a distraction at that point. Even if you were, like, if you made good choices about what the key line looked like, if it's right at the edge of your frame, it isn't really acting like a presentation at that point. For me, you may get judges that disagree, and that's why you have 3 judges or 5 judges in a competition, because you're going to get different opinions about almost everything. But that is how I view that. That doesn't even look like a key line to me. That looks like some funkiness along the edge of the frame, if that makes sense.
Okay, so you don't like this as much as when it's right along the edge of the image? Or am I backwards?
I think it sounds like you might be backwards. I would prefer a presentation that were a little bit more traditional rather than right along the edge of the frame. Does that mean, am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so this one that you're looking at right now, you like this presentation where the key line is, or you don't?
I don't.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I don't think we can see the presentation part in the Lightroom frame. I can see it
Oh.
behind it, but I can't see it on.
Let me
I thought there
unshare
was a
my screen
presentation
and
right along the
reshare
edge
it.
of the image is what I thought was going on.
Okay, let me stop sharing my screen and reshare it because it's not sharing the way I want it to.
Oh, in the smaller thumbnail, I can see there is a little difference to that. Yeah, you might be right.
Let me stop sharing and reshare.
Sorry, but I saw the very bottom of that image underneath your Lightroom window, and I could see the frame. So I was like, something's going on with Lightroom.
Oh, hold on. Why did that go? Okay, is that better?
Yeah. Oh,
That's what I was hoping
that's a
to show you.
presentation. Yeah, there you go.
There we go.
Okay. Well, that actually has a presentation on. So all of the things I said about presentation on this image, never mind.
Okay, so do you like this presentation better, or do you like it better when the key line is actually right along the edge, touching your actual image?
I think either way will work, depending on the image. Everything is image dependent. I don't think presentations, almost the primary rule of them is they should not distract from the image. It has to enhance or complement. And this, either way that they did this, with the colors used and the thinness of the key line and the subtleness of the presentation, it's not going to pull away from the image. And this enhances the image inside of the presentation, what they've done here. What I can see that they've done here. Yeah, absolutely. So if they did a different presentation where they had the key line connect to the image and the subtle soft gray tones were outside of the key line, I think that would be probably equally complementary to the image and wouldn't be a distraction either. Either way, I think probably would have worked for this image.
All right. Okay, let's go to the next image. Our next image is in Master Landscape. It's Balboa Light Show. It received an 84, and then it was challenged up to an 85. So after I read this, I would like you, Cayce, to explain what a challenge is and why a judge might challenge an image up or why they might challenge an image down.
Absolutely.
I've seen both of those happen. Usually they were going up, and then I was at a competition where they challenged and brought it down, and I was like, oh, the maker's probably not very happy about that. But all of the points that were brought up as to why they were bringing it down were valid points. So Aaron was the judge who made the comments on this. Also, Eleanor and Mel did make comments because of it being a challenge. So I'm going to tell you about what they said. Aaron said this had a creative title. It tells the story, had great impact. The lightning was like a leading line, bringing him into the harbor scene. He liked how the maker handled the technical issues, the wide range of tones from bright white in the lightning to the deep shadows with detail in them. It was nicely composed, had nice impact, and was an excellent image. Eleanor had also scored it an 85, and her comments were that it was an excellent image. The impact was just amazing. The composition, triangle after triangle after triangle. There are leading lines. She thought it was very well done. The horizon was at the thirds. The colors were beautiful, and everything flowed together very well. Mel gave it an 82, and he said, listening to his fellow judges, that he was listening to the judges. He was a little concerned with the blacks at the bottom third of the image. He thought you could have cropped in a little further, that most of the lightning is dead center to the image, which can be good or bad. And he said you can take it either way. He said he could definitely come up a little bit. Aaron made a rebuttal comment of that there's lots of strengths, possibly could crop the bottom. It might help the image, but it could take away the boat on the left with the mast that helps keep his eye in on that side. The image was then rescored and all judges gave it an 85. So it came up to an 85 up to the next category.
Right. Yes, and I think that that's probably where I would have started with my scoring on this if I were judging the competition. I think I would have been in the 85 or possibly a little bit higher, depending. You never know for sure, but that's the way it feels for me looking at it now. So challenges are interesting because it's one of the few times, unless something else strange happens in a competition, where you get to hear all three judges give their rationale for why they scored an image the way they score it. Any judge can challenge any image, any score that an image receives during the competition, including images that you've already passed by. So for instance, if this image were scored an 85 and we went back and we continued the competition, and 10 images later, one of the judges said, you know what, I want to go back to that lightning image. I feel like I want to re-challenge that image. That's absolutely within the judge's prerogative, and they can do that for any time during a competition, whether you're outside the category or it doesn't matter.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. The reason for challenging an image up can vary, going, like, for instance, this image got an 84 and the judge who challenged it thought it deserved to be in the next category and wanted to see if he could get the image a couple extra points. That's a perfectly valid reason to challenge an image. I've challenged images where I've been pretty high on them, my score wise, I've been very high, and the image did not score anywhere near. And I thought the image, maybe the judges overlooked something that I thought, or maybe I was high because I'm not seeing something that the other judges saw, and I wanted to hear what their take on it was. So that's another reason to challenge an image. If your take on it is way off of what some of the other judges have given the image, the challenging down is an interesting thing. It doesn't happen very often at the local level. Most judges let stuff go for local competitions. The few that do it, and this is also why it's done at the bigger levels, the state and national, is they don't like to give the maker and the audience the idea that that image would do well in a real competition. Is there, and I'm using real in quotes. In their mind, if you let this maker think this is a merit image and they take it to state, they're going to get crushed, and we shouldn't let them think that. That's why they'll challenge an image down a lot of times at the local level, because they're trying not to give an unrealistic view of how the maker might do with that image at a higher competition. At higher levels, you'll often get challenges down because judges think that they're seeing something more accurately than other judges. So, if they think that their 77 should more accurately reflect the score that the image got, and it actually got an 80, and they don't think it's an image that deserves merit, regardless of you're not trying to send a message to the maker necessarily at that point. I would think you're more trying to make sure that the image gets a score that you feel it represents that image to your satisfaction. Both of those are reasons to challenge an image down, just to try to make sure that an image winds up where you felt like it should have been. Any questions on the challenge process?
No, I had no idea that you could come back and challenge later on in the competition. So if it's one of those images that's just hanging around in your mind going, no,
Yes,
that really deserves a different score, either up or down.
Yeah, that does not
Yeah.
happen very often. And I suspect it's probably because a lot of people don't know that. Even people who judge at the local level probably are not aware that they can do that. I've only seen it happen once. And so, yeah, it's not I don't think it's a common knowledge thing that people know you can, doesn't really matter when, you can challenge an image whenever.
Okay. I'm going to really quickly shrink this image down for a second because I'm not sure if I can see when I'm in full screen mode when people are trying to get in the room, and I'm just going to make sure there's nobody waiting to get in.
Okay.
Okay, there's nobody else waiting to get in, which is good. So we'll go back to our full screen here. Oops, we got big. There we go.
Now, does this image have a presentation that I can't see, or is it just image
I
to
think
black
it's just
edge?
black. I think
Yeah.
it does have a line around it, a key line. But I'm not sure.
Okay, as long as what I'm seeing is
Yeah,
the
it does
full
look
image, then
black
that's
around the outside. Like it does have a black frame around it.
obviously this image is pretty impactful when it pops around. Impact is a really judge specific thing, because some images will impact judges a lot, and other judges not so much. It's almost a judge by judge basis. For the most part, I mean, obviously you'll get images that are generally recognized by everybody looking at it. This image is spectacular, so that image will have a lot of impact. And then you can have images that get more of a split judge recognition of impact. I think this image, for me, clearly has a lot of impact. On the other hand, if you remove the lightning strike from your consideration, that image overall with no lightning strike is not necessarily a great image, which may be why, if you were the maker and you were wondering why this isn't scoring even higher, overall the image isn't necessarily, it's not like a 90 or 95 basic image. The lightning strike is spectacular and really bumps you up into that 85 or maybe higher. I think, again, like I may have intimated earlier, I probably would have been a little higher in this. I love a lot of things about this image. The thing that I don't necessarily like is cropping that boat on the lower left right in half like that. For me, that feels like a little, that's an abrupt crop. You may have had to do that for what's out of the frame that we can't tell. I don't know, but again, that feels like an issue to my eye. Why is that boat cut in half?
And who knows, maybe if that whole boat was there, it would have given it a couple extra more points.
Possibly, or
Possibly.
depending on what you're not seeing, maybe it would have been a distraction. You never know one way or the other. All you can do is look at what you see and point out an area that's a problem for you. It may not be fixable because, like I said, if you crop wider, maybe that's a huge distraction right there, and it had to be cropped that way. I don't know that, only the maker does. But when looking at what you're presented with, that's a thing. The mention of all the triangular elements are interesting because triangles within an image are attention getters, and repeated elements are a good compositional thing. So repeated appearance of triangles can be fun, like a fun thing on a compositional basis. The triangles in this image they're a little bit spread out, and like there are some in the houses, there are some in the boat masts and stuff like that. They don't necessarily complement each other in the way where you might see like a row of fence posts going off in the distance, all being a repeated compositional element would be attractive. It's not necessarily attractive that way. It's just a fun, interesting part of the composition to me, anyway. Another judge might see that slightly differently. But I think this image was at least accurately judged, and maybe maybe could have gotten an extra couple of points. The the color harmonies in this, all the blues and all the different depths of blue in this, from the lightning strike on out to the really dark blues in the buildings and stuff, are all really cool. I like that monochrome nature of images. That works for me. Yeah, I would be behind this image if it came up in front of me in a competition.
Okay, very nice. Our next image is in the Master Nature category. It was titled Got It. It received a 77 as an overall score. Eleanor gave it a 79, and she said, it's not sharp. The feathers on both sides look like there's an incredible amount of noise in them, and they're just not sharp. She did enjoy the title. It's very fitting. She loved the fact that you can see the water droplets. It really captures the action. She thinks if the maker spent more time and works on getting a sharper image, that it would do very well. So maybe try that again. Convince the eagle to do that again.
Yeah. Yeah. First of all, you have to say this is a really fantastic moment to have caught in the everything about what's happening inside the wings of the eagle, inside the undersides and the leading edge of the left wing or right hand side of, as you're looking at the image, and the right wing left hand side as you're looking at the image. The eyes and the beak and the white head and all of those water drop, all of that stuff is fantastic. Really, really great. It does look a little bit like it's been over sharpened, which is odd because the criticism is that it's not sharp. And I will say that yes, that is true. Those big expanses of wing backs that you can see, the backs of the wings, not only not being sharp, but having a lot of noise. And it's not necessarily just the noise, because grain or noise, whatever you want to call it, is one thing and can be lived with. But there's a lot, if you go in and look at that close, there's a lot of color, what might be called color banding, or a lot of off colors that the sharpening has brought out. And I think that is hard to overlook as a judge. It is hard to overlook that left hand wing, left hand for the eagle, right hand for us as the viewer, is really out of focus and really soft and really noisy, and it almost draws your eye more than the face of the eagle, which I rhapsodized about a little earlier. That's a fantastic area, that the eagle, but it kind of gets a little lost in that big expanse of soft wing, and which is unfortunate, because again, what a great moment. You're there, you prepared, you did all your work, and you got that moment of that eagle in the water pulling something out, and it's just a couple of issues short in the technical end, and that's going to crush your score. And there's not a way around that. If you could with Photoshop Kung Fu, go in there and maybe denoise some of that stuff and bring the colors into a workable, believable look. I think you probably, what was the score of this image?
This one was overall, it got a 77.
77, yeah. Such a good moment. I think that if you could minimize the flaws on this, but that's going to be hard, and it's going to take a lot of Photoshop. But if you could do that, you might be able to creep up into a merit on this. I don't think it's going to do better than that, because of those issues that are, a judge's eye is always going to see that. When I first looked at this earlier today, when I was sort of reviewing the images for talking about them tonight, I was kind of wondering if there was a way you could crop this in tighter and really tighter, and really let the face of that eagle stand out a lot more. And that might be worth playing with as the maker. Go in there and try that a little bit. I know you're losing some of the story, but you also lose a lot of the flaw. So I don't know, that if I were the maker, I would try that and see if I could find a crop that would let that face of that eagle stand out a lot more, because everything that's happening inside you know, all those water drops and splashes and everything. Just really great. Such a nice part of that image.
Okay. Again, I just keep checking to make sure we aren't leaving people
Yeah, no worries.
in the room. I'll have to figure that out for next time. This is the first time I've actually been the host of a Zoom thing with more than one person on it. So it's all a learning process. So our next one is Crow's Nest Waterfall. It received a, oh, wait. I take that back. That's not our next one. That's coming up later. Our next one is in the regular category under illustrative, and it's Vintage Bloom. It received a 79. Eleanor is the judge that made comments. She scored it an 80, which is on the low end of deserving of merit. She enjoyed the title. She said it was very fitting for the image. She liked the presentation. Presentation was very nice. The darkness around the edge of the image just brings you right to the center of it. She really enjoyed that. And she liked the way that the light was on the flower and where the light was coming from on the right side. And you can see that it's going down the stem. What kept her from going higher was that the image just starts to fall off on the outside edges of the right-hand side, as well as the left-hand side. And there's also a little thing on the left-hand side on the bottom of the flower, not the bottom of the image, but on the bottom of the flower. She wasn't sure if it was part of the leaf or something. But she said that was distracting. And other than that, she thought it was a nice image. She did think you need to work on the focus and maybe cleaning up a little bit, and the image would score higher.
Yes. So touching back on presentations, this is a big presentation, multiple lines, multiple thicknesses of lines, all in colors that you're picking up from your subject matter inside the image. And yet it's not a distraction because they've kept it really subtle, really deep. It's all working within the palette of everything that's happening in the image, including the outside color. So, you know, when you're talking about presentations, you know, it's not always just a thin little key line. This is a good this is a big presentation, a heavy, sort of aggressive presentation, but one that the maker has skillfully kept from being a distraction in any way, shape, or form. In fact, it's more of a complement to the image in the way that they did it. So this is a good example when you're thinking about a presentation. To my eye, you know, this is an example of a good one that is more than just a thin little stroke around, you know, around your subject matter. So for me, I think I may have a different take on this image. I think that everything that's happening in the flower, in the bud, is great. I love the textures, the sharpness, the crispness, the clarity. I think this image to me feels really top heavy. All of the bottom is just stem and out of focus, some little bit of out of focus leaves. And I don't know that adds, for me, if I were judging it, if that adds to the image at all. It may even be, I think it probably is a negative. I wondered if you did a landscape crop on this, cropping out a lot of that bottom and just let the flower live in the space without a bunch of stem on there, if that might not be a more successful image. I'm not were you going to say something?
No, I wasn't.
Okay, I thought I heard somebody start to talk. And the conceit of the image, or the presentation that the maker has given it, where it's a colored background, transition to background with a black and white feeling subject matter. For me, and I wonder if other judges felt this as well, looking at it, it almost feels, gimmicky isn't the right word, but it feels like you're making a stylistic choice that maybe didn't necessarily need to be made. It fights against the rest of the feel of the image. Like thinking back, and you wouldn't do this during a competition where you compare one image to another. If you think back to that lightning image, all of those blues worked in harmony together to tell, or to have a real nice feel to that color harmony of that image. And this image, all of these warm tones working through the image from top to bottom, the nice browns working down to darker, deeper intensity. And then you have this in appearance, a black and white thing sticking out of that composition. Feels like it's not working together with the rest of the image. I wonder if you would have, and I'm not going to say sepia tone this, but give that look a little bit of a toning to keep it within the tonal register of the rest of the colors of the image, if that might not have been a little bit more successful. Like I said, I think that the flower on this is great. I love the lighting on it. It's subtle, it's soft, skillfully done. The crispness and the sharpness of the clarity, everything working in the bud of that is great. I think that there are just a lot of things that have been done post camera that pull focus away from that to the detriment of the image. I would like to see a landscape crop. I would like to see something a little bit more tonally in keeping together, so that it's not fighting against, that you don't have two things fighting against each other. It all works together in harmony. That would be my suggestion.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Would it be better if it was completely monotone without any color?
I would certainly like to see that, and as the maker, I would look at that on my screen and see how that looked. I feel like it probably would be, but without being able to look at it myself, it's a speculation. So yes, that would be another way to go, is to have no color at all, have it just be black and white throughout. And I think that I'd like to see that image, actually.
Do you have a problem with the depth of field on the edges of the flower? Because that was a function of the lens.
Yeah, no, I don't. I think that the areas of the flower that I want to be in focus are in focus. I don't think that I need to see, and I don't think the image doesn't need to have the depth of the flower from front edge to back edge be sharp for me. I'm fine with it falling off in softness as it goes through the flower. The face of that flower is the best part of it anyway. For me, as I'm looking at it, it's, the way that it's lit by the photographer is really nice, soft and lovely. So I like all of that.
Thank you.
我哋打唔打？打乜嘢？我而家聽緊，我聽緊。得啦得啦。
Rebecca, can you mute?
Hi, Rebecca.
The microphone.
Oh, sorry. I thought I was on mute. I'm sorry. Shh. I'm sorry. I thought.
That's okay. All right. We'll go to the next image. It's regular in the landscape category. It's called Go Between Bridge. It scored a 79. Mel is the one who gave comments. He scored it an 80. He said it's right on that border of a merit, not merit thing. The water is handled very nicely. The bushes and trees along the riverbank there are very nice. The clouds are okay, but there's nothing exciting about the clouds. He thought the biggest thing is that it lacks a bit of impact. It's nicely presented. It looks nice, but it just lacks that little bit of impact. He thinks maybe if you cropped it a little bit at the bottom in the water and a lot of the clouds off the top, make it more of a panoramic. He thinks maybe he could have gone up a bit in the score. And he said overall, he thought the image was handled nicely. And he scored it an 80, but the overall score was a 79.
Interesting. Well, I think that that's an accurate assessment for me as well. In addition to overall impact, I think that you could say that there's not really a subject matter per se either. It's a, if you're trying to show the bridge, you've cropped the bridge in a not necessarily great spot. So that's truncated to the eye and sort of an abrupt, an abrupt feel to a central subject matter. So if the subject matter is your buildings, there's not a lot of that there. As just a regular, like a cityscape kind of thing, the water is the strongest point of the image. I do think that the water has a lot of silkiness to it that is a nice technical element that's thrown in there. But the rest of the image, if you look at it, it feels a little flat in both impact but also like maybe contrast and subject matter. There's not a thing that stands out and tells a big story, or even what you might say a small story. I think it's probably accurately scored for what the subject matter and the technical aspects that have been put into the image represent, if that makes sense.
So when you're talking about impact, and you
Yes.
said there's not a thing that tells the story, is when people are talking about impact, is that what you're looking for? The major point that's going to bring your attention to and tells you the most about that image?
Yes, and it's really hard to define. I think it's like that infamous old definition, and this is a weird thing to say, but it's famous, so it's a saying that people have probably heard before. It's like the old definition of pornography. I can't describe it, but I know it when I see it. That was a judge talking about a case of pornography brought before a court in the United States. So yeah, it is, a lot of times it's judge dependent. Each judge knows it when they see it, and different judges have different criteria for what's impactful. If you think back over the images that we've looked at today, like the lightning strike, that had impact. There was a thing, there was an element of that image that really jumped out to your eye. The eagle, even though that technically that image fell off, the face of that eagle and the moment that eagle was captured in, that was a thing. That was the thing that story represented, the impact that story told. I'm trying to remember some of the images that we looked at. Can I see the thumbnails again?
Yes.
All of the thumbnails. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, the flower. That flower, the bud of that has impact. Your eye gets pulled into there, and it's got a great look to it, a great feel. There are some technical things that I think you could do to increase that impact of that image. The lighthouse tower, above and beyond the score that image might get, just the sunset of that sky, and the way that the sun was, bringing rays in through the sky down into the water and stuff. There's impact in that, even if it's not technically on its merits, maybe a great image. Even the bottles, you could say, had some impact, and we're telling kind of a cool story about all the colors that were represented through through the depth of the bottle. As you go through the bottle, there's all these little derivations of different colors and different tones and different densities that that tells a nice little story and impacts the eye in a way. And then now if you can bring that bridge back up, see when that pops up, where's the thing? Where's the thing that you want the judge's eye to look at in this? And that's impact, is when an image pops up, what's the thing that's going to tell the story? So, in cityscapes or landscapes where it's a much more subtle story being told, the judge has still got to be able to find some impact there. If you think about the 12 elements of a good photograph, or that the judges are looking at to judge how well an image will score, impact is number one. It's that way for a reason. Your image has to be impactful in some way, shape, or form.
Okay.
So
Very good.
you got to keep that in mind when you're considering what image you're going to put in a competition. And overall, the maker did not help themselves with just having that thick white border at the edge of the print. That did not help at all.
Okay.
Just something to keep in mind.
All right. Our next image is in the regular category in landscape, Ghost Town Church. It received a 76. Aaron made the comments. He scored it a 75 in the above average category. He appreciated what the maker was going for here, having this interesting, pretty remote location. Photographically, we've kind of got a combination of this old building that has likely been light painted or otherwise lit up by the photographer. The silhouette here with the shadows kind of behind that, where we see one other building off in the distance, then bringing astrophotography into it as well. I think what kept me from going higher than above average with this is a couple of things. One is the image is pretty disjointed set of colors throughout, with cool tones in the foreground, with the old metal building that's kind of grayish and blue tones, and then the background, everything switches to warmer tones. The disjointedness between the cool tones and the foreground warm tones in the background prevents it all from really coming together. The other thing he would like to see is the sky scene, the stars and celestial objects, that they look like they're not quite sharp. So practice that technique and try and get those a bit sharper, dial those things in. This could do very well, but not quite there with this one.
And what was the score that it got?
It got a 76, and Aaron, the commenter, had given this one a 75.
Okay, yeah, that's probably lower than I would have been. I don't mind, and certainly wouldn't judge down because it has cool elements and warm elements in the image. I think that sometimes those things can play together. I think if there are technical elements in the sky, and there may be, I'm looking at it very closely now, and there might be some sharpness issues there. That's an area you can improve in. For me, I feel like there are a lot of those competing elements that I kind of referenced earlier that stop me from being able to appreciate the image maybe the way the maker would like me to be. Some of those are foreground, not the building itself, although I feel like the building itself might be a little hot. It appears to me on my screen with my balance that that could be brought down a little bit. The exposure or the brightness of that building could be brought down a little bit and would still work within the rest of the image. Would be a better presentation for that building if it were more in keeping with the harmony of the dark sky and the dark mountains or hills and the dark foreground on the right, keeping it a little bit more in tone, brightness wise, not color wise necessarily. I think I'm okay with the color, but brightness wise with the rest of the image. But then as you move through the foreground to the left, all of those brightly lit bushes for me, that is the area that feels like it's in competition with the rest of the image. I would try a edit with all of that stuff toned down considerably. You don't want it to be gone, I don't think, but you could vignette along the whole bottom of that, and let your foreground drop out to much deeper and darker, to keep in harmony with what the rest of the image kind of looks like, the feel of it, and tone down those bushes quite a bit all along the left-hand side of the frame, and let the building be your brighter point and the sky be your brighter point. And then if it were me, I might even go in with Photoshop and clone out all of that noise along the peak of the mountain right there, whatever that tall little building kind of thing is. I don't think that adds to your story. It's a distraction to the eye. All those little towery things, spiky things sticking up there, I would pull all of those out if it were my image, and let that skyline be clean as it goes into the Milky Way, and vignetting along the right hand side of the frame, so you go out to a more darker. I'm still staying in the foreground here, so that foreground that you're seeing, transitioned out of the frame more smoothly to a darker feel all along the frame, left and right. So I would try that and re-enter it, this image, and see if you don't do better. As I said, my initial score might not have been as low as the 75 or 76 that this image got, but I certainly think there are things you can do to this image that would bring it much more in play with a mirrored image than it shows right now.
All right, thank you. Our next one. Oh, go ahead.
As I'm looking at it, there might be a little too much sky, a lot of empty sky. But I know you want to have some Milky Way, but you can get that if you cropped, half inch or an inch off that top of that sky. You're still going to have all of that, all of the Milky Way story being told up there, but you're focusing a little bit more on that cool little blue building that's in the middle of all that warmth. So I might try that as well.
Okay, thank you. So our next one, also in the regular landscape category, is Crow's Nest Waterfall. It received a 77. Eleanor scored it a 76, and she is the one who made comments. She said she's a sucker for long exposures. She really enjoyed seeing the silky water here, and she commends the maker on working with getting the long exposure. The water is very pretty. What didn't work for her on this was the impact. Her eye kept going to the bright spots on the water, but also the angle that the water's falling. She thought perhaps if they were standing a bit to the left-hand side and they were watching the water coming down towards them, that it would flow better. We have the rocks that are right in the center of the picture, and that's cutting the waterfall in half. She sort of just struggled with that. The other issue was the border. She said the border around the outside of it being white is very striking, and it pulled her eye away from the image. She would have gone with something dark because it's a dark image, and then perhaps something like a light color stroke. And she thought that also might make a difference. And she would consider that with your future images.
Yes, I'm going to jump on the bandwagon on the presentation. The presentation here is murderous to this image. All of that white being right off the image is not flattering to what's going on. I think that the silky water for me is very cool. I like it. I wonder as I look at it if it's not a little too silky, if I might not want to see a little tiny bit of a hint of detail on what's happening, and especially in the very bottom area where the water flows into the bigger body, where the waterfall flows into the bigger body of water. Just a little bit hint of some detail on that might not be slightly more interesting to look at. Yeah, this is one of those images where you would look at it and the water is the thing. That's the thing you want to be the judge's eye to, oh yeah, that's the story there. Oh, that's the thing that the judges you want them to see. So the rest of the image is a support character for your water in this, really, and it's not really that interesting. I wonder if you did some vignetting along the edges of that, did a better presentation, whether that issue would go away to a large degree or a medium degree, so you'd bump this up into a merit, or I have seen and I have done with some of my images where the image was just lacking a little element of interest, a little thing to make the image really pop, where I've dropped in a texture overlay or some kind of a well, texture's probably the word that I'm looking for, some kind of a texture look and feel to the image, and then work that into the image with Photoshop and layers and all that stuff, so that the image has another element of interest to it that helps the judge appreciate what's going on. I've had that happen in my own image, where the image as recorded in the camera and as I saw in my mind's eye, because I got the image that I was thinking of, but then in making a competition print out of that, it just lacked a little something. There was a little bit missing, and I had a wonderful photographer, Karen Nakamura from LA, tell me you should put some kind of a texture overlay in that and give that image some teeth, give it some bite, give it a rough edge. And to me, that's what this image feels like. Like it's missing the same thing my image was missing. It feels like it needs a little bite to this, not in the water area, but in the rest of it. So if the maker wants to hit me up somewhere outside of this particular workshop talk, I can show you the image that I'm talking about. I can show you my plain image and the one that and then that same image after I added some texture and some oomph to it, some muscle in this form of some texture overlaying and some depth and density that was added to the image in Photoshop to give it some extra teeth. So I'd be happy to do that. But yeah, as this image shows here, it's a nice image. It belongs in the above average category for the water alone, because that's the maker has presented that in a way that as a judge I could say, yes, that's well done. But there's not that extra kicker to it that you really need to start moving up in category levels, if that makes sense. My dog's sneezing over here. She's serial sneezing. All right. You okay? All right.
Okay, I would be interested to see that image. If we have you come make comments again for us, it would be nice to see your before and after image where you added the texture.
Yeah, and I have the after. I could get that one pretty readily,
Okay.
but it's the before that I'd really have to hunt for. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Even just seeing the after would probably be beneficial too.
Yeah.
Our next image is in the regular category in nature. It's called Two Queens. It received a score of a 77. Aaron is the judge who's commented on this one. He also scored it a 77 in the above average category. He appreciated the colors that we had. The image appeared and she saw the nice scene of these butterflies and flowers in the background. He wanted to see a lot of vibrant colors, and we've got that here. I think that the composition, at least as it comes to the positioning of the butterflies, our main subjects in the frame, is good. You've got the two on a bit of diagonal. One of them is mostly centered in the frame, which I think works out okay because we've got one over on the right to kind of balance things out. Couple things that he would note for this or similar images that might help you score a little bit higher in the future. One is that with the very shallow depth of field in play here, the butterflies are definitely in sharp, crisp focus, but as it falls off, some of the elements in the background are so far out of depth of field and so far out of focus that they're abstract enough to get a little bit distracting. He said, I would note the large kind of greenish yellow lines that we see across the lower right corner of the image and coming down the left side of the image about a quarter of the way in. They're just out of focus enough that if they're tree branches or grass stems, they're abstract enough that they're distracting. It's not clear what they are. The other issue that he saw, other than the butterflies, is the rest of the image has a bit of muddiness to it. And looking at the stems and the flowers in the background, he's not sure if it wasn't quite in focus or whether it's noise or something like that. It's a little bit distracting overall, but he did appreciate the positioning of the subjects.
Okay. Well, first, before I forget, let me mention that in that image I was referencing earlier that Karen suggested I add some texture to, I actually entered that at PPA and merited with an 85. So her critique was right on with that, and I've always remembered that suggestion of hers. So I did actually merit nationally with that image from her suggestion. So for this image, I gotta say I disagree a little bit with the judge's take on this. I don't think it's the out of focus at all in the background that's the problem for me. I think that the areas in the plane of focus with the butterflies, all of the flowers that the butterflies are standing on, and the other ones to the left of those flowers that are in focus but soft, are a very large distracting element there. The color, I mean, all of that color standing out immediately around the butterfly wings confuses the issue. And then the other thing is the darkest things in this image, the darkest areas for your eye to see are the butterflies. Everything else is lighter, particularly the background. And so I think that light background for me pulls my eye away from the butterfly. So for me, this is a busyness issue, not a out of focus issue. The out of focus helps it from being less busy. And then you have that brightish red color that's behind that's a busy area that the eye is going to be drawn to that red. If you had been able to get an angle on these butterflies that didn't have so many extraneous flowers immediately around them where the stems are going up through their wings, and you can see the buds of those flowers right behind the wings and through the wings, and there's another extraneous bud of those flowers off the lower left frame. All of that stuff pulls interest away from the butterflies, which should be, those butterflies should pop. They should be jumping out of this frame to your eye. And because the background is so bright and there's so much flowers around them, they get lost a little bit, which is unfortunate, because I mean, they're sharp and they're crisp and there's clarity and there's awesomeness in the color, and you're that close to that insect, being able to capture that is nice. Look at those antennae, look at how sharp they are. All of that is great, but it kind of gets lost in the confusion of all of the riot of other things that are happening around there. I wish that this had been able to be without some of those background elements that pull focus away from that. And I don't think any of that is it being out of focus. That only helps. And then of course, again, I want to mention it again because it's important. The presentation is not good for being complementary to your subject matter or your image in general. You know, if you're going to take the time to put a presentation on there, do it, you know, really do a good one. It does nothing but help you, and a bad one does nothing but hurt you. There's no other way to say that. A bad presentation, you know, judges try not to let that affect them. And I have done that, and I've been there. But when an image pops around and one of the first things you see is a bad presentation, you know, the rest of the time you're trying to tell yourself, don't let that presentation influence you. Don't let that presentation influence you. And so, you think to yourself how well you'd be able to do that if you were looking at an image and you could see great butterflies, you could see bright background, but you're also seeing that presentation. Every time you look at the image, the presentation is popping out to your eye, and it shouldn't be. It should be complementary and helpful to the image and not hurtful. So I'm just trying to illustrate why judges sometimes harp on or mention presentations so much, because bad ones are really hard to get around.
There was another image, and it's not one of the ones we're looking at tonight, but one of the judges made a comment about it because the presentation, the frame of it was not even on all sides. It was really short on either the top or the bottom. I don't remember, but you could tell it wasn't balanced well.
Yeah.
in the presentation, and it was in the judges' comments. And when we're getting judges to comment and they have, you know, a few seconds to make comments,
Yes.
they can't make a lot of comments. So if they're talking about your presentation, it obviously had an effect on them.
Oh, and that's the other thing to keep in mind. Yeah, judges are people, and we have like 10, 15 seconds to look at an image before the moderator is going, judges, scores please, judges. So you know, in 15 seconds, you know, you have to both figure out where on the scale of scores you want that image to be, why, what are the things that pop out at you that are the most, because you can't, you know, I've talked about a couple of these images for 10 minutes, it feels like. You can't do that as a judge. You got to say, like, in a minute or two, why. So you want to highlight the most important things so you get the message across to the maker. These things are the most important reasons why this image isn't doing well. So you got to try and figure out what those most important things are. And you got to do that in, like, you know, 15 seconds, maybe 20 at the most, if you're really pushing it. And by that time, the moderator's going, Cayce, hello, where's your score, buddy? And, you know, so
Yeah,
all of those things. Yeah.
That's one of the benefits of tonight, is that if somebody has an image that they really want to work on and make better, and use some of the comments that they get from the judges in the competition and another judge that we have assisting us, this is the format where you can ask those questions, you can get more comments, and you can actually interact with the judge here and say, okay, but my thought was this, and the judge will tell you, okay, that's a good thought, or maybe that's not such a good thought.
Yeah, no, exactly.
And help you to make your image better. So that's kind of the point of why we're doing this, is so people can get more comments, more constructive information, and bring their images up to make them better.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I will tell you that I certainly wish that there were things like this that existed back in the 90s and, you know, aughts and the early 2010s, when I was entering image competition more regularly, where I could have submitted images and gotten feedback like this, because I feel like that would have helped me get better a lot sooner than you know, than the process took without that, let's say.
I know for me, I hear the comments and they go by very quickly. And
Yes.
at least now when we're videotaping it and recording it and you can watch it again later, you can hear those comments again. When it's live in an in-person event, we can't do that. So, I mean, that is a benefit to the recorded process of this. But I know that, you're excited if your image does well and gets a good score. So you may not hear all the comments. And the opposite can be true. If your image doesn't score well and not where you expected it to be, you can be a little miffed.
A little miffed. Oh,
And-
yeah,
and
I've been there.
You might not appreciate the comments. By the time the commenting is done, you're like, well, wait, now I'm going to pay attention. And you've missed the comments because you're dealing with your stress over not getting the score that you liked.
Yeah.
So it is nice to be able to come back and watch and hear those comments from the judges. But again, tonight is really a good event because we can hear a lot more comments, and makers do have the ability to interact and ask specific questions and ask for clarifications on things. So we have one more image. It's in the regular photographic artist category. This one, the scores were a little different. I went ahead and wrote down what all the scores were. We had a 78, an 82, and an 84. So 2 judges merited it, and not just barely. I mean, they went over the 80 by a few points, one being an 84, and one had a 78. So because there was such a variety in this one, I thought that I would pull this one up. It's called Star Spangled Skies. The score was an 81. It ended up tying and then actually was judged and won best of category for this. Mel made the comments, and he's the one who scored it an 84. And his comments were, this is deserving of a merit. The presentation for this image is nicely done. It has impact with all the colors. I think that the fireworks are handled very nicely. The exposure time is great. Only the tiniest of the centers are really bright. Everything else is just really nice and crisp. It's laid out in the frame nicely, and he liked the treatment of the borders along this. So it's just a really nice, pleasant presentation and nicely done. So again, this is one where the presentation actually got some very nice comments from this judge because it had an impact.
Yeah, I think that the presentation on this image is actually very complimentary. Rather than being neutral or negative, it in fact helps the image quite a bit. Just because it's subtle, but plays to the tone and coloring of what's going on within the frame so nicely that it sends a good message. Firework images are always very interesting because you're playing with a couple of elements. First of all, fireworks are going to be impactful, and yet we've all seen firework images a million times. So how is this firework image different than the last 100 firework images that you've seen to make it be special in the way that like you would want a merit or better image to get? Technically, so it's got impact built in, yes. Technically done very, very well. The exposure's spot on, as the original judge commented on. Nothing is, it's fireworks yet, and yet nothing is blown out or too bright. There's maybe a couple of spots that you might say, that's a white spot where an explosion is happening right this second. It's colorful. It's pleasant to look at. But, and Frank Peel, who's a guy that I've judged with a lot, has a saying that I usually butcher when I try to recreate it, but he says something paraphrased along the lines of, how is this image different or better than a photographer standing 5 feet away from you would have been able to get, that elevates your image to a great image above what they might have gotten? And you know, in this image, I don't know that there's anything about this image that's better than what 15 photographers standing within 5 feet of this guy might have gotten, or guy or gal, I should say, the maker. So that's why I agree. This is a merit image. On impact and skill alone, I would merit this. Maybe even higher than barely merit, maybe higher than 80, 81, maybe even higher than 82. But when you're entering image competition, you want to be able to get 86s, 85s. You want somebody to challenge your image up because it got an 84 and you feel like, you know, the judge feels like that image should have gotten an 85. I'm going to challenge it up. It belongs in the next category. So the way to do that is to try to find the little thing, a little extra difference that 15 photographers standing next to you didn't think to do. That separates out you as a superior image maker. In fireworks images, the thing that I've seen that does that is often some foreground elements incorporated into the image. I know we've all seen firework images over like New York skyline, or you know, over different foregrounds that, you know, some cool element of a foreground that really make that image sing. You know, that may not have been available here, and you know, maybe the maker did not have that opportunity, but that would be an element that would possibly give this image a chance to be a better score than it's at, which again, as I said, I'm not being mean to this image. I think this is a fully meritable image. You know, and I would merit this image easily. It would be, as soon as it popped around, yes, that's a merit image. Great presentation, by the way. Love it. 83, possibly maybe 84. So my suggestions are maybe along the lines of thinking of things that might be able to be done that would get it into the 85, 86, 87 range. So, you know, that's why I'm making suggestions for it, not because I think the image isn't good. So I just wanted to be clear about that.
I have a question.
Yeah. Most of the images tonight, almost all of them, are fighting for a couple of points, you know, to take it from a 79 to an 81. So, you know, a little bit of improvement bumps that up just enough to get it in, you know, get it where you might be more happy with the score. So I think this is a really good image, and as already mentioned and Kim mentioned, a really complimentary presentation that helps this image quite a bit. I wouldn't be able to take it any higher without some separation element that really made the image sing in some way.
I have a question on this one.
Yeah.
Since this is in the photographic artist category, it's a composite. Would thumbnails of the individual pieces have added to what you're saying, as far as how is it different from the other 5 photographers standing next to you?
Yes. In fact, I would have loved to have seen thumbnail images that helped me be able to appreciate more any effort that the maker made to, as I said and as you said, differentiate this from what other photographers are able to get. I wasn't even thinking of this in the digital artistry category. So yeah, those extra images to help you be able to appreciate what the maker did are vital, almost more than good to do. They're vital to be able to see what you started with and what you wound up with.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. Well, that does it for tonight's images. Thank you, Cayce, very much for all of your comments.
I hope that was helpful in any way. I feel like I rambled a lot.
I appreciated it. I'm sure other people did too.
Yep.
And does anybody have any questions for Cayce before we let him go?
Nope, answered all of mine.
Okay, well, he's also, we can always find him available with questions. We can always send him an email if anybody has questions later. So I'm going to stop the recording right now. First, I'm going to stop this little sharing right here. And I'm going to stop our recording.
Thank you, everybody.
So thank everybody. Yeah, it was great. And I'm
Thanks.
sure we're going to put this up so that it can be watched later.